Hello and welcome to the channel of Hashaliach once again, and I trust that God is blessing you. Today is the 1st of September 2024, so we're into a new month. So, this is the first message I've done for about 8 days, I think it is, because I've been having a bit of a break from the digital world. And to be honest with you, it was much easier than I expected. Just switched off the phone, switched off the laptop, and just read and read and read. And I did receive quite a lot of things from the Lord, so I was very grateful for that. But just grateful to see that you can switch off from the world, and then when you come back online, the world's still there. Yeah, things happen, but it was certainly a good experience. I can't say I'm totally rested because of it, because it was quite intense, to be honest. But I did hear from God quite a bit. But what I want to look at today is a message that's been sort of with me for quite a few weeks now, beyond the veil, beyond the veil. And I've been praying into this, and so I just want to go through a number of scriptures and talk about a few things that I believe God is doing right at this very moment. So allow me to begin by starting in well, my Bible, the Complete Jewish Study Bible. It actually begins in Joel chapter 3, verse 1. But if you've got a Bible other than the Complete Jewish Study Bible, it will be Joel chapter 2, verse 28, beginning anyway. So, anyway, let me read to you from Joel. I'll actually just reference Joel 2:28. It's chapter 3 with me, but just to make things easier. So, Joel 2:28. After this, I will pour out my spirit on all humanity. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions, and also on male and female slaves. In those days, I will pour out my spirit. Now, this is referenced by the Apostle Peter in Acts chapter 2, and he says, this is what Joel was prophesying when the Spirit of God descended on a large crowd of people as they were assembled in Acts chapter 2. But this, what Peter talked about, was not the complete fulfillment of what Joel prophesies here in chapter 2. And the reason it cannot be the final fulfillment. Because if we look at the very first verse that I read, verse 28, it says, after this, I will pour out my spirit on all humanity. First of all, well, two things. God's going to pour out a spirit on all humanity, it says. So did that happen in Acts chapter 2? No, it was just a very small group of people in comparison to all of humanity. But also, what does it mean by after this? After what? We'll read the other verses in Acts chapter 2, and it talks about how God will restore the years that the locust has eaten. It also goes on to say, then my people will never again be shamed. That's certainly not the case at the moment, talking about Israel. There's a lot of conflict and a lot of accusations and things being thrown at them. And interestingly, it also talks about the day of the Lord in chapters 1 and 2. So it talks about the day of the Lord. And then it goes, after this, I'll put out my spirit in all humanity. Now, I'm not going to get into this, but just to give you something to think about. So it talks about the day of the Lord, right? Well, let me just read to you a couple of verses. Let me just see if I can very quickly pick out. Okay, chapter 2, verse 11. Adonai shouts orders to his forces. His army is immense, mighty. and it does what he says. For great is the day of Adonai, fearsome, terrifying. Who can endure it? So there it's talking about the day of the Lord. And I'm sure I've seen it again. But anyway, you read that and you'll see it's talking about the day of the Lord, and it says after this he's going to pour out his spirit on all humanity. But then if you just go on in Joel chapter 2, so when I just go into verse 30, I will show wonders in the sky and on earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. So it talks about the day of the Lord or the day of Adonai in 1 and 2 as though it's happening. And then it says, after this, I'll pour out my spirit on all people. And then it goes on to say, after he's poured out the spirit on all humanity, the sun will be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. Anyway, that's just something for you to ponder. It's something for me to ponder. I need to look into this deeper because I'm not sure what's going on here, but that's not what I want to talk about. Anyway, what I want to talk about is this God pouring out his spirit on all humanity. Now, I believe this is something that is already started, but it's still in the very early stages. You're certainly seeing many more people talking about dreams and visions and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And I accept that, a lot of these things can be deceptions, they could be satanic, um, frauds, uh, but many are from God. Not everything is fraudulent or a deception. There is no doubt that people more and more are seeing beyond the veil, they're seeing into the spirit realm. No question about that at all. And so I believe what happened in Acts chapter 2 to a small group of people, God is now doing on a much larger scale because the problems in the world are absolutely global. Every nation is in disarray and turmoil. We're in a right old mess. And God is pouring out his spirit in people all over the place. And these people are testifying to the dreams, visions, words, whatever it is they're getting. But another interesting aspect is there's a lot of videos out there that are appearing from people, whether driving along in their cars or they're just walking along the road or even in their gardens, in their houses, and suddenly they see the strangest of things, whether it's beings or strange things that they can't describe. It's almost like the veil's been pulled back and they're seeing into the spiritual realm. Something interesting a friend said to me maybe a month or so ago. He said the veil is getting thinner. And that was round about the same time I'd got this title, the Beyond the Veil. And I thought it was very interesting. He said the veil's getting thinner. So it's like it's easier to see beyond the veil. And this is what is definitely happening with a lot of people. Now, I've spoke about my own experiences, but I am convinced there are thousands, maybe millions of people out there that are having these sort of experiences and they're seeing beyond the veil. Let me read to you a testimony from the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I have to boast, there is nothing to be gained by it, but I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a man in union with the Messiah who 14 years ago was snatched up to the third heaven. Whether he was in the body or outside the body, I don't know. God knows. It's very obvious something amazing happened to Paul. He knew he'd been snatched up to the third heaven, but he didn't know if he was in the body or out the body. Now, in my experience, and I'm not comparing myself with Paul, so don't let anybody think that or accuse me of that. But it makes me think of this when what happened to me. I I went. There's no doubt. For 7 weeks, I was completely in a spiritual realm, a different dimension. I could see my own body and my life in the physical realm, but I was walking somewhere else in many different situations in the spirit realm. It was the weirdest of things. Now, I can't say I was caught up to the third heaven because most of the time I hadn't a clue where I was. I knew certainly from when I went into certain visions that I knew I was in different scenarios of what had happened in the world in the past, historical events. And I saw things in the present and I saw things in the future. But there is no doubt that I had this experience, and I've been listening to a number of people over the last few years giving similar type of testimonies. And as I've just said earlier, I don't believe all of these are false. I believe that God is doing a great work, and it may be that you have experienced something like this. You must always take it to the Lord. Just make sure that it is coming from God and it isn't a deception. Verse 3. And I know that such a man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I don't know, God knows, so I've just read that, was snatched into Gan Eden and heard things that cannot be put into words, things unlawful for a human being to utter. Now, I can't say I saw things unlawful for a human being to utter. I certainly saw things that I cannot tell you about, but that is only because I don't have the words to articulate. I can't describe it. So I wouldn't say I saw things unlawful, but I certainly saw some strange things. And all I can do is keep praying into that and waiting for God to give further insight. About such a man I will boast, but about myself I will not boast, except in regard to my weaknesses. If I did want to boast, I would not be foolish because I would be speaking the truth. But because of the extraordinary greatness of the revelations, I refrain, so that no one will think more of me than what my words or deeds may warrant. Let me just stop there. What is he saying? He's not really going to boast other than he's talking about the things that God's done for him or through him. God must always get the glory in every situation. Anything I speak that is proven to be absolutely truthful, God gets all the glory. Any mistake I make, I take responsibility for that. But anything that God has truly given me comes to pass, or any messages that encourage, or whatever, God gets all the glory. God, I'm just a messenger, and I'm not perfect by far. Therefore, to keep me from becoming overly proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from the adversary, Satan, to pound away at me so that I wouldn't grow conceited. See, God, even in his love, knows that when you're given great revelation, as Paul was, there's always a danger that you can get above your station. So Paul in his love allowed God in his love allowed this to happen to Paul. It sounds terrible, but God knew that this had to be done to keep Paul well balanced and humble. However bad it was, and we know it was bad because in verse 8 he says, 3 times I begged the Lord to take the thing away from me. But he told me, my grace is enough for you, for my power is brought to perfection in weakness. See, in our humanity, we always think we need to be strong, doing things in our own flesh. But this is not the way with God. It's not the way with God. And sometimes if you're being brought down and you're in a really, really struggling, you could be close to a great breakthrough as God is going to do something great in your life. In your weakness, then his power is made perfect. Therefore, I am very happy to boast about my weakness in order that the Messiah's power will rest upon me. Now, I am brought back to a very, very old film, and I'm sure that you guys are familiar. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to my very last scripture for when I bring it out later on. An old film, and it was called The Wizard of Oz. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of it. And you've got Dorothy, young girl, and her little dog Toto. And you've got the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion. And the Wizard of Oz is this great, all knowing, all seeing god, deity, so to speak. Fearsome, loud, booming voice. Anyway, there are requests that Dorothy and her friends have got for the Wizard of Oz, so they travel all the way and they gain access to this huge mansion, this big palace, whatever you want to call it. And as they stand in this huge room, the big booming voice of the Wizard of Oz, and there's all sorts of noises, thunder, lightning, and all sorts of things happening. It really was a frightening situation for Dorothy and her friends. But Dorothy's little dog, Toto, just a very small dog, it suddenly just peeled off to the left and it grabbed the corner of a curtain and it started to drag this curtain back. And behind this curtain was an old man and he was cranking levers and pulling levers and pushing buttons and all sorts of things. In other words, he was operating machinery, which was the Wizard of Oz. It was just a machine, and he was controlling all of these bits of machinery. And so the fraud was exposed. This huge, terrifying entity was nothing more than an old man pretending, carrying out a fraud. And this is what is happening today. See, Dorothy and her friends saw beyond the veil. But in real time, this is what God is doing with his people. He's allowing us to see beyond the veil. Just as happened with the Apostle Paul, just as was prophesied by the prophet Joel. There was a partial fulfillment back in Acts chapter 2, but there is going to be a final fulfillment. Now, whether this is the actual final fulfillment, I believe it could be, because I believe it's the building of the end times church. Time will tell. But there is no doubt God is pouring out his spirit. I've never seen the amount of videos and testimonies and things that people are saying, even that I meet in my own circles, the things that's happening with people, there's no question, very, very spiritual. They're seeing things, dreams and visions, very, very real, and they're proving to be very, very prophetic. And again, that's what's happened with myself, but I'm quite sure it's happened with some of you. And God is pouring out his spirit because we're in that season where all the evil is being exposed. The Wizard of Oz is being exposed. The curtain is being pulled back and all this evil. And it's been brought into God's glorious light for the whole world to see. Ultimately, the whole world's going to see beyond the veil in the sense that all the evil's going to be exposed. Now, the Spirit that's poured out on God's people, they will be seeing in the spiritual realm. But this great exposure is happening thick and fast, and I know you all know that it is happening. We're all starting to see beyond the veil. This is nothing new. It didn't just happen in Acts chapter 2, but it happened with your prophets Isaiah, Hosea, Amos, Jeremiah. All through the centuries up to now, it's been happening. But now on a much grander scale, global, worldwide, many, many more people, because God is going to put an end to this evil, because this is the time for God's glory. Yes, we will eventually move in to the very end of time, but this is not that time. This is not it at the moment. This is God's time, or it's very soon approaching to be totally. We're going to see incredible things, incredible things. This madness is going to come to an end. Again, for how long, I don't know, but it's going to be a great time for God, for God's people, and there is going to be some amazing celebrations coming up. God is allowing us to see beyond the veil. Let me just finish with a scripture from 2 Kings chapter 6. Now, this is the situation with Elisha and his servant Gehazi. And the king of Aram is preparing attacks against Israel, and he's thwarted continuously. And he believes there's a traitor in his ranks. And he says, who is this traitor? But his advisors say to him, he says, nobody is a traitor. God is showing the prophet Elisha what our plans are. And there's nothing we can do about it. So anyway, the king of Aram sets out an army to surround Elisha and Gehazi. And this is where I pick it up in 2 Kings, and I'm going to start in verse 15. The servant of the man of God got up early in the morning. On going outside, he saw an army with horses and chariots surrounding the city. His servant said to him, "Oh, my master, this is terrible. What are we going to do?" He answered, "Don't be afraid. Those who are with us outnumber those who are with them." Elisha prayed, "Adonai, I ask you to open his eyes so that he can see." Then Adonai opened the young man's eyes, and he saw there before him, all around Elisha, the mountain was covered with horses and fiery chariots. Elisha prayed for his servant to be able to see beyond the veil. And that's what happened. And he saw this massive army, totally outnumbering any physical army or demonic army that Satan could send. God's troops far outnumber Satan's troops. You and I are being allowed to see beyond the veil so we can have that assurance and that confidence in God and that peace in these times of trouble, because not everything is as it seems. This is why God is raising people up all over the place in social media to give comfort to God's people. They are seeing beyond the veil, and they're bringing that information to God's people to give them comfort. But in that comfort and peace, there's also warnings and challenges. We're being told what's coming, what's happening, so that we can pray into these things, so that we can take action, so that we can have proper strategic direction, tactical plans that we can put into operation, godly things, not fleshly. We are being allowed to see beyond the veil. God is pouring out his Spirit. God is completely in control. And this is a tremendous time to be alive, because each and every day we're seeing more and more beyond the veil. The film The Matrix was not really a film, it was a documentary. The main character, played by Keanu Reeves, and Neo, I think he was called, he came to this realization that he was living in an illusion, a delusion. It was a fraud. And his eyes had been opened to the reality of this. That's what's happening with us. We are seeing beyond the veil. All the evil is being exposed. And God is going to reverse things. And going back to the book of Joel, he's going to restore the years that the locust has eaten. And that's coming for you and I, friends. So take heart. This is a time of great shaking, but it's also a time of great blessing. So God bless you. Until next time.